The Hollywood Advertising Club, in cooperation with the Liberty Broadcasting System, brings you Advertising in Action, a weekly series devoted to an interpretation and discussion of the advertising profession, which is the right arm of the American system of free enterprise. Today's guests on the panel are J. Neil Reagan, President of the Advertising Association of the West and manager of McCann Erickson Incorporated in Hollywood, Charles W. Collier, Executive Vice President of the Advertising Association of the West of San Francisco, Robert McAndrews, Managing Director of the Southern California Broadcasters Association, President of the Hollywood Advertising Club, and a member of the Board of the Advertising Association of the West, and John Kemp, Promotion Manager of the Hollywood Citizen News and Vice President of the Advertising Association of the West. Our subject today is the role of organized advertising, and certainly we couldn't have a finer group of panel members in order to evaluate some of the overall work that is being done, particularly here in the West, by organized advertising associations. In this connection, it's interesting to note that the Advertising Association of the West, which is represented, has a membership composed of 6,000 or more men and women engaged in all phases of the advertising business here in the Western area. And the Hollywood Advertising Club, which has been presenting this series of broadcasts in association with Liberty, is a member of this association. First of all, I think we should talk with the president of the association, Mr. J. Neil Reagan. Mr. Reagan has recently, in pursuit of his duties as president, traveled over 15,000 miles. He's talked before advertising groups in every part of the territory which is represented by this association, and I know that he'll have some stimulating things to say. Neil, first of all, I'd like to ask you how many states were encompassed in your travels?
Well, the association covers the 11 western states and British Columbia in Canada.
And British Columbia, there are two
clubs, one in Victoria and one in Vancouver.
Well, now, as president of the association, I wonder if you could tell our radio audience what you consider to be the primary objectives of the Advertising Association of the West.
Well, John, the Advertising Association of the West has many objectives. Probably the greatest service in the West is in promoting the business of the West so that our manufacturers, our retailers, our agriculturists, everyone engaged in business may successfully do their job in competing with others in the rest of the country in the fields that they would naturally compete in. We try to offer the services that we can through the Advertising Association of the West to all these many people.
Now, are there any other services or activities which immediately come to mind as being performed by the association?
Well, to be specific, the Advertising Association of the West works, of course, closely with the schools of the 11 western states and British Columbia in trying to explain to the teachers and through the teachers to the children, and we hope it gets back into the homes through the children and the teachers, the place of advertising in our free economic system, to try to disprove the charge that's often made that advertising is an economic waste, show them that advertising is a vital necessity if we are to continue the free economic system. We are also watching closely at all times legislative matters that would, if allowed to go through without protest, probably take away some of our rights as free citizens working in a free economic system. We also try to act as a buying guide to consumers. We are engaged at times in marketing studies that are particularly pertinent to business here in the West.
I understand that recently you conducted a series here in Los Angeles at the Los Angeles City College. Were you pleased with the results of that effort?
Very pleased, John. We ran a 10-day clinic, 3 hours a day, for a selected group of teachers of the Los Angeles school systems, in which we tried to give them an insight into every phase of advertising, both retail or the advertising that's used by retailers, how it comes about, also that of the manufacturers and wholesalers, distributors. We had 125 teachers. The school board was very helpful in going along with us on this clinic. In fact, made it possible for the teachers in this 10-day clinic to get 2 university credits as well as in-point service credits, looking toward increases in pay. And we got nothing but commendation from all sides, including the teachers individually, the school board, and many of the businesses that helped us with this clinic.
Now, pursuing this question of the business activity, before we move on to some of our other panel members, but this is all good stuff, as the saying goes, does the association work with groups such as the Better Business Bureaus?
Very definitely. In fact, I don't know whether I'm taking away from a point that Mr. Collier will make when questions are put to him, but actually, the Advertising Association of the West, the oldest organization of its kind in the country, was, we like to think, in part greatly responsible for the organization of the Better Business Bureaus in this country.
That's interesting to know. It's a fact that, as a matter of fact, I wasn't familiar with. You, of course, are very helpful, I know, in working with public service agencies. In matters of that kind, are you able to bring some of the skill of your membership to bear on perhaps a public service basis?
Very definitely, John. We work quite closely with the Advertising Council, which is a national organization designed to further the traffic safety problem, blood bank. We will shortly be engaged in a Get Out the Vote for the 1952 political campaigns, or elections, I should say. And the Advertising Association of the West sort of represents the Advertising Council in the 11 western states in working at the grassroots to help the Advertising Council accomplish its purposes. And the advertising fraternity, not only here in the West but all over the country, of course, makes available to the Advertising Council the services of its top men as far as copywriting, artwork, and things like that are concerned.
Thank you, Neil. We'll get back to some other matters of interest here very shortly. Right now, I'd like to have you, of the listening audience, meet Mr. Charles W. Collier, affectionately known as Chick Collier, Executive Vice President of the Advertising Association of the West, whose offices are up in San Francisco. Mr. Collier, I'd like to ask you a question which I feel would interest our audience. What, in essence, is the Advertising Association of the West?
Well, the Advertising Association of the West, John, is an organization of advertising people working largely through the advertising clubs, such as was mentioned, but in addition to that, having other members in those states and in those cities where we don't have ad clubs. In other words, we're trying to represent all sides of advertising, and we're the only organization of that sort in the western area.
Well, now, during this series of broadcasts, Chick, I know that being up in San Francisco, you haven't been able to listen to all of them, but would you tell us, just in very succinct form, what you conceive of as the role and part of advertising in our economy?
Well, I think Neil has pretty well expressed that, but it seems to me that advertising's one right to live is serving the consumer. And we think it does serve the consumer by making it possible for the consumer to have better goods at lower prices than they could possibly have otherwise. In other words, without advertising, you couldn't have mass production. And without mass production, you couldn't have mass marketing. And you could manufacture many things, but unless you had markets and people to buy, then of course it wouldn't work out. So that's where advertising fits as we see it.
What do you think that advertising does for the seller? For instance, does it replace the salesman? Does it add expenses to the seller's job of doing business? Where does it fit into that actual merchandising picture?
Well, I think that most businesses who use advertising would agree that certainly it will not replace the salesman. Of course, we do have mail order selling where advertising alone is depended upon, but most of us agree that advertising is helping the salesman. It makes it possible for the salesman to complete a sale much quicker than if he didn't have the advertising in advance.
It's a pre-selling job that requires closure, but it really leads up to that point many times.
It tells the customer much that she or he wants to know before they buy.
Now, Bob McAndrews over here, the president of the Hollywood Advertising Club, would be ideally suited to give us some of the perspective of the individual club within the association. Can you tell us how your organization works with the Advertising Association of the West, Bob?
John, from the standpoint of original perspective, maybe we might try to collate what we're talking about here as organized advertising with the experiences of our listeners. I know when our visitors from Europe or South America or Asia come over here, one of the things that impresses them about the United States is that we have so darn many organizations. I look around the table here and I see these 5 friends of mine, and most of them, all of them, belong both to business associations and associations in their private life. Here's John Kemp. He's in the American Newspaper Publishers Association, the Promotion Managers Association. For all I know, he's also in the Tuesday Evening Birdwatchers Club out in North Hollywood. Mrs. Kemp will be in a church. She will be in a school alumni association, probably a women's club, a luncheon club. Organization is such a keynote of American life today. Now, I think in every field outside of advertising, we belong to our organization separately, part of our business life and our social life. In the advertising field, in our advertising clubs and in the Advertising Association of the West, we combine the two, because advertising is both a business for us and it's also a way of life. And most of us, we live it, eat it, breathe it, sleep it 24 hours a day. And these ad clubs give us both our business professional association and our social association too, because I know in my own case, I look around this table here and here's all the fellows I work with, but they're also very close friends out of working hours.
Now, Bob, do you, in the Hollywood Advertising Club, get ideas and suggestions? Is there sort of a rubbing of intellects with the other clubs in the association?
We always get ideas in Hollywood, you know that. Our club is one of the babies of the 40 clubs in the AAW. We were founded just after the war to meet 2 needs. One is a geographical need. This area here, Los Angeles metropolitan area, has expanded so tremendously in the past few years. Just since the last census, for instance, it's gone up, around 28%. And we found that the Los Angeles Advertising Club was getting so large and was getting so difficult to reach for many of our members who live out in this area that we decided, with the help of AAW, that it was worth founding another one. So we are serving a geographical function in that we get together the people interested in advertising who work and live in and around Hollywood. But in addition to that, we are also serving the specialized functions that Hollywood has and no other part of the country has, and that primarily is its activities as the radio and television capital of the world. So we, in our Hollywood Club, sure, we are an integral part of the Advertising Association of the West. Just like the other 39 clubs, we get ideas for programs from them. We work with them on competitions, but then in addition to that, we act, you might say, as the liaison for the AAW with the radio and television industry because of our location here.
I believe it has also happened, hasn't it, Bob, that the advertising clubs and the Advertising Association have acted as spokesmen for the propriety and integrity of the advertising business when it has, for any reason, been subjected to some negative response from government or other.
Well, that's right. Of course, our first job is to keep our house clean, keep our house in order, so that when anything on the outside comes up which attacks us, that we can go into court, you might say the court of public opinion, with clean hands. And that's one of the prime functions of our clubs and our association, is to constantly try to raise the standards of the advertising profession. That is one of the prime purposes of our meetings. That's why we have speakers that bring that type of material to us. Then, as you say, if we are convinced in our own minds that we have a legitimate case and something negative comes up, such as a governmental proposal which would definitely harm us, then we all get to work. AAW itself is only a couple of people, Chick Collier here and a couple of assistants as far as full-time staff, so it's up to us, the 40 clubs, to get behind when AAW says this is bad for advertising. We fight it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's certainly a very helpful comment. John Kemp over here, who, as we mentioned, is promotion manager of the Hollywood Citizen News and is noted as a member of the Birdwatcher Society in North Hollywood, and probably
make that Van Nuys, would it?
Van Nuys, and a den father probably for the Cub Scouts. John, as vice president of the association, did you have any would you say that you have had any particular experience in this educational aspect of things? I know something that Neil said.
Yes, I'd like to add to what Neil said, that this school we held a short while ago was so successful that the Board of Education has asked us to continue it, not only next year, but in the years to follow. And Redlands University has also asked us to put on a similar school for them this summer, so that I feel that school was very successful.
Do you have any knowledge of the efforts that were made by advertising when the OPS issue of the proper function of advertising in business came to an issue? It seems to me I recall that the association did rather a good job in helping interpret the desirability. Perhaps Chick Collier would be the guy to...
Well, I'd rather have Chick answer that. I think he's more familiar with it than I am.
Well, we always feel that we want to work with the government, but when something comes up that we think hurts business generally, we step in. And here was a case where the Seattle Advertising Club called our attention to what they thought was an error, wherein the OPS would tell a merchant or a manufacturer whether or not he could advertise during this emergency period. And we feel that that right should stand with the merchant or the manufacturer, that after all we do have free enterprise. So actually, through all of the clubs, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Hollywood, we moved in and got the congressman to appreciate the danger of that. So that particular bill has been tabled, and I hope will remain that way.
Well, now, John, I didn't want to get away from you without getting some of the interesting aspects that you have to talk about on this association business. As a vice president, what, for instance, are your responsibilities, and how might they be of interest to the radio public?
Well, you know, ordinarily vice presidents are a dime a dozen, but under men like Neil Reagan and Chick Collier, they keep us pretty busy. In fact, sometimes I think they want us to do all their work. We work very closely with the advertising clubs that are in our particular districts and try to carry out the ideas that Neil and Chick have in building a strong organization.
Did you want to say anything more? I don't want to talk through a pause for effect, but I don't want to let a lull lie there either.
Well, I'll tell you, I would like to say something about the financing of AEW.
I was going to ask you about the loot. How is it supported in this work?
There's no loot. I wouldn't say that. Of course, the individual members of the advertising club pay small dues into the association, but most of the money comes from the business firms and organizations who believe in the work that this association is doing. If time allowed, I could point out that a great many of the values that we have in the West started on promotion of men in this association. Some of the earliest travel advertising which helped to build the West was produced by AEW members. Also, in the early days, when some of the various cities of the West were competing strongly against each other, we concluded a pact at one of our conventions where the axe was buried and it was agreed that all Western cities would work together for the greater value of Western advertising area. This paid off many times. One of the examples of this was the occasion when a certain national magazine in various cities of the Pacific Coast combined their sales story in several pages, indicating to the people of the East that they could come out to the West and go back another way and see nearly all of it while here at a small extra expense.
Now, John, I believe that there's been some fine work done in recognizing the community where we work. That is Hollywood Recognition Week. Would you tell our listeners across the country a little bit about that?
Well, with Advertising Recognition Week, we're not attempting to pat ourselves on the back or tell how good we are, but we do want to take this week to impress upon the people what advertising has done for the buyer of advertising, how it's made possible the buying of merchandise that they need at a lower price than they would pay if it wasn't for advertising, and how it has brought before the public all the labor-saving devices and at a price that they can afford to pay them. I honestly believe that if it weren't for advertising, the American standard of living would be very much lower than it is today.
Chick, did you have something to add to John's comment there?
Well, John mentioned about Advertising Recognition Week, which is coming up again, February 17 to 23rd, and in this area, under John's direction, a big job, I think, is going to be done. As he mentioned, the idea is to try to interpret advertising to the public, how it serves the consumer, how it serves business, and it is just something that has become a very valuable service, I believe.
Now, Neil, I know you've been listening thoughtfully to this diversified comment here concerning the association of which you are president. I wonder if at this point you would like to interject any observations that have come to mind concerning the cooperative spirit that you've found pervading here, perhaps more than anyone other than Chick. You've had a chance to really get around. Have you visited most or all of the clubs here?
Practically all of them, John. As has been said, I've just finished about 15,000 miles, started up in Vancouver, British Columbia. I've been as far east as Denver, Salt Lake, and as far southwest, or southeast, I should say, as Tucson and Phoenix just this past week. And in every instance, the clubs are up on their toes. They're providing an invaluable service in their own home locality, and that's what the Advertising Association of the West wants, because our work, while it is an association in the 11 western states and western Canada, our work is primarily, or our interest is primarily concerned with what goes on in the home locality of all of the member clubs, and in those places where no clubs exist, where we do have members, business organizations that make it possible for the Advertising Association to continue its work. And in every instance, I found that the clubs were right on their toes. They were taking what the association could give them. The association was taking what we could of value from their activities there and seeing how it could be revamped to be used in a different locality, but found a lot of interest on the part of all of the communities that we visited in bettering business, in bettering advertising, and making it of greater service to the consumer.
Now, as you've gone around to these clubs, I know they've made it quite an occasion, your arrival and all of that, and you've probably made a speech to them. Could you give us a 60 or 120-second summary of the nub of the type of message that you've tried to bring to these other members of the association?
Well, as far as the wingding you were talking about, the hospitality at times becomes overwhelming. As far as what I talk about when I get there, John, you've heard most of it as we went around this table here this morning.
I see. All right. Well, now, Bob McAndrews is lying fallow over there, has been. We don't like to see this. Would you plow a straight furrow for us here regarding perhaps radio commercials or something like that, Bob?
John, first of all, I think that John Kemp here is being unduly modest. He says that vice presidents of his type are a dime a dozen. I don't think that's true anymore at all. Inflation has come. He's worth at least 15 cents a dozen. I think maybe we are a little provincial here. We're talking about our own advertising club and our Advertising Association of the West, and after all, this is a transcontinental network broadcast. So perhaps we should just note the fact that we are not alone in this work in organizing advertising and in trying to raise the standards and to act as the liaison and interpreter of advertising to the public. After all, there are advertising clubs in all of the major cities of the country, even in that terra incognita east of the Rockies. And they are, of course, organized in the Advertising Federation of America, and they are doing very similar work east of the Rockies as our organization with its 6,000 members is doing here in the West. Now, your remark there about radio commercials, John, I guess every listener here has his own idea of radio commercials. He probably has his own little black book with the offenders and his own little white book, at least a mental white book, with the ones that he likes. We in AAW are endeavoring to improve regularly the worth of radio and television commercials. We have competitions annually for the best commercials turned out in small towns, in large cities, the best commercials in programs, the best spot announcements, and those are judged not only on the basis of what they deliver in sales, but on their listenability. And there is a large jury which makes the decision, and that jury represents varying groups of the community. That is an AAW project that's been going on now for many years, and I think it's the only one in the country. There are plenty of competitions in programming. You have your Peabody Awards, your DuPont Awards, but here we felt that our business is advertising, and no one pays too much attention to the advertising content of radio, and that's where this competition got on. And incidentally, it is also equaled in similar competitions for magazine advertising, newspaper, outdoor, direct mail, and all of the other major media.
I'm very happy that you interjected that note of culture there. For 13 weeks I've been waiting for it, and I think we'll all say together to you, in hoc signo vinces. Now, if we could turn to Chick Collier for just a moment concerning the convention plans for next year. We had a good convention this year. I believe it was in Los Angeles or Hollywood, or both, I guess, and then the year before in Denver. Now, what are the plans for next summer?
Well, John, it was in Denver last summer. Of course, you had so much to do with the Hollywood one that perhaps it seems very close at hand. But we will be in Seattle next June 22nd and we're planning one of our best. The boys up there are really doing a job. They're meeting right now, and we're going to try to have a program that will help business, not only in the West, but throughout this country.
And what about your midwinter meeting? Those have been mighty fine, I know.
We have what we call a workshop meeting at the Claremont Hotel in Oakland, January the 24th. The Ad Club officers will come there from throughout the whole area. I think that, as John expressed it, a great part of our work comes through the volunteers who make it possible for us to do a larger job.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have only a few minutes left, and this broadcast will be the last of this present series. In that connection, and speaking for Benton Pascal, who is our producer and vice president in charge of the Western Division of the Liberty Broadcasting System, and for myself as well, I would like to say a very sincere thank you to all of the persons who have so helpfully and unselfishly given of their time in order that our listeners across the country might share in their knowledge of the advertising profession, one of the great professions in American life. I would further like to say that we have yet to find anyone who didn't go beyond the call of duty, and all of these men who have come to our microphones had more than enough to do in pursuing their own responsibilities. So I know that you feel as we do, that when they came here and shared with us what they know, and they know a lot, why, we've been way ahead of the game for that. John, did you want to say something?
I'd just like to say that if any of the universities or business organizations would like to have copies of the talks that have been given, we'd be very happy to supply them if they'll address their letters to Benton Pascal at the Liberty Network in Hollywood. Several universities have already written and asked for those things, and I want them to know that they're available for anybody else.
Fine. Well, now then, we'll just about terminate this series then. In the next few minutes, I'd like to say to Bob McAndrews, thank you a million, Bob, for all that you've done on our behalf. You've been wonderful.
John, as a spokesman for the Hollywood Advertising Club, let me get my 2 bits worth in here. They say that when you're making a speech, you should tell them at the start what you're going to tell them, and then when it's all over, tell them what you've told them. Maybe at this time, at the end of our 13-week series, it would be apropos to just remind the people what we've been trying to do in this series. We know that advertising affects everybody intimately, and yet too much of what goes on behind the scenes is unknown. We've tried to tell here in 13 weeks what makes advertising tick. We know it has been a little bit heavy and academic at times, but it was necessarily so in order to tell an academic subject. On behalf of the Advertising Club, and I know the AAW, let us give sincere thanks to you, John Baird, as moderator, to Ben Pascal as producer and organizer of this entire deal, and to the Liberty Network, which has carried it. To the best of my knowledge, it is the first time any such program has been donated to organized advertising. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Bob, and another thank you to our panel members today, J. Neil Reagan, Charles W. Collier, Robert McAndrews, and John Kemp, all officers of the Advertising Association of the West and prominent executives in the field of advertising. Advertising in Action has been presented to you by the Hollywood Advertising Club, coast to coast on the Liberty Broadcasting System. This program was produced by Benton Pascal, and your moderator is John Baird. We hope to have you as our guests again when we next talk about advertising. This is John Baird speaking, and this is LBS, America's newest major network, the Liberty Broadcasting System.